Hi, True Avatars, and welcome back to your Queer Video Game Podcast. This is episode 13, and I am your host, Zoe Wild. I am a transgender bisexual woman, and my pronouns are she, her. I love video games so much that I just cannot shut up about them. As you can hear, my guests are already here. But before I introduce them, I'm just going to quickly say that this podcast was recorded on December 16th. So we're recording this in advance. We're doing this so we don't have to schedule any guests over the holidays. I still wanted to bring you new content during the break, but I also, I don't really like it when my favorite podcasts go on hiatus, but I also understand why they do. No one wants to record over the holidays. People want to take that break. So I thought that pre-recording was the best middle ground for bringing you new queer content. So you still have something to listen to over the break, because I like to listen to podcasts over the break too, when I'm doing dishes or house chores or whatever. So anyway, this week I'm joined by two returning guests. First up is Amy Lynn, a transgender lesbian. Her pronouns are she, her. How are you doing, Amy Lynn?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming back. And I feel like this is probably episode 300 that you've been on, because you're always around. And second up, back from... I wrote back from last week, but you are not back from last week.
I am not.
Copy and pasted this. Is Ekami from Twitch, who also goes by Amy. Ekami is a bisexual woman who, as we know, is exploring and considering pansexuality, unless that's changed.
And demisexuality.
And demisexuality. Ekami's pronouns are... See, I didn't even copy and paste this from the correct podcast.
It's all good.
Ekami's pronouns are she, her. How are you doing, Ekami?
Doing well. I've been perusing Steam lately in anticipation of the winter sale coming up, so that's been my night so far.
Oh, yeah, that starts on, 3 days from now, so we're recording on December 16th. It starts on the 19th, and I think it runs into January. So if you're listening to this when it releases, the Steam sale is still going on.
Mm-hmm. Are there any games that either of you are really looking forward to that you're hoping will go on sale for the winter sale?
My entire wish list.
True, valid.
I still haven't picked up Arcade Spirits. I don't know if it would be, but I probably am going to pick that up on Switch anyways. Yeah, that's the only sort of thing on my list, aside from some things that we'll be talking about later today that I just learned about from the show notes for this episode. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, yeah, there's some fun stuff. It was, anyone who's listening to this too, if there's a queer game you think we should be talking about, or there's a queer game you're working on, or someone who's working on it, it's really hard to just go on Google and search queer games coming out in 2025 or queer games that came out in 2024. So please reach out and let me know. Don't be a stranger. I want to know about them. I will highlight them on the show. I found one website called Gaming Mag, and they're no longer a magazine, but this is where I found a few of these games coming out, because I was I need a place that's going to highlight stuff that I'm looking for, that's relevant to the show. Because some of the games that I'm talking about too are games I heard about from people that I had on the show the last few weeks, which is great, but I'd also love to highlight more from people who weren't guests too. So if you're listening to this, like I said, the thing I put at the end of every episode, if you've listened that far, and I say, if you know a cool queer story or game or something on the show, I am not joking, please tell me. I actually had one person come on as a guest because they asked me early on. They just said, hey, I want to be on your show. And I'm cool, I need guests. I want to talk about games with queer people. So they came on the show. So seriously, I can't promise that you'll be a guest for sure, but if you have a cool story to share or a game, I will highlight it. That's what this podcast is for. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually going to say, in just preparing a little bit for what we're going to chat about, I was also Googling looking through my Steam library, but also just Googling okay, what's a good summary of the queer games that came out, or games by queer devs. And I actually, one website I'll probably look into it more, but I enjoyed most of the articles I found on it, is Checkpoint Gaming. And that's had some really nice articles that I've read, and by the I think the articulist I saw, I believe she's a trans woman, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, that was a fun one to discover and kind of just think about, hey, I can go check that out at some point. I could read more articles on there.
I've just typed it in on Google. So I won't obviously be able to reference it in this show, but I've added it to the list, and now I'm going to go through that, and I'll track it for next year. So when we're doing this show next year, Hopefully you're both on for that. It's a year away. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in between now and then. But I'll be able to use that website as well throughout the year to track games and talk about them on the podcast as the year goes by too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This goes a little bit beyond, I think, our intended purview or your intended purview for the show. But what you were saying kind of made me about like if anyone in the audience knows of any games or stories, if anyone knows of any queer board games. I would be very interested to hear about that because I've been in some, board game shops recently, and I'm very curious which ones maybe may have had sort of queer development or maybe even queer themes in the games, because it's not super evident from the boxes.
Yeah, and like it doesn't say on the box like, "Hey, a trans woman made this."
True. I do have a recommendation, actually, in that sense, because I played it earlier this year, I think. It is a TTRPG in the same vein as, like, D&D, just a different system, but similar vibe, called Thirsty Sword Lesbians. It was very fun. I believe the publisher was Evil Hat Productions, but... there were a number of them. Yeah, they've done some cool stuff. So, it was a fun one because it was like you they set it up so that you, instead of being like race and class that you pick like in D&D, you're picking like an archetype of a character, and then you build your character from that. As I recall, I think there was like a werewolf kind of girl. I played.
I'm already sold.
Yeah, it's it's
when
pretty
you
fun.
When you said archetype, I was thinking like just you choose butcher femme and they have different stats or something.
Yeah, it's so fun. I was trying to remember what archetype I went for. I remember my character was an artist, like a very soft-spoken artist. And yeah, it's like we did a one-shot on Twitch, me and some other friends. It's probably no longer on Twitch, but might be on YouTube. Yeah, it's just you can work pretty you can it sets it up so that you can do your own pre-written kind of like setting and then kind of see where the story develops from there, or you can make your own. I think our DM made her own just kind of based on the world that the game presents. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'd recommend it. And it was my first like foray into something that was a TTRPG that wasn't D&D, but was similar in like its inspirations and stuff, and just like building on that. So yeah, I'd recommend that one.
So I realized while we were doing the preamble, I started talking about the episode as if I've already introduced like the topic. So anyone who's listening and going like, what the hell is she on about?
What are we talking about?
So this year we're doing the 2024 queer, quote unquote, queer in review. So I hope that makes sense. Like, it's a year in review. I think I'm very funny. So
that's
please
wonderful. No. Laugh track, but actual laugh track. That was so good.
So basically, for anyone who doesn't, who maybe didn't follow that, or anyway, whatever, it's just to elaborate a little bit. Today, I'm going to take us through all the queer video game news, updates, events, and releases insofar that I was able to find them. As I mentioned before, it's not easy finding queer games that are either made by queer people, or they have queer themes in them, or they are like evidently queer. There's not like a database of gay games, and if there is, I have not found it. So please link it to me because I need it desperately. I can't do the show without it. So insofar that I was able to find them, but we're going to go month by month and deconstruct each month as we go. So I hope that sounds okay.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Okay. So I'm sorry to cut off our preamble, but we'll just jump right into January, which is probably the shortest month I have listed here because I only have one game listed, and it's just The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, which is hardly a release because it's like a remaster of a game that already had a PS5 like enhancement, and but the game itself is very good. So have either of you? I know Ekami, you bought my copy of The Last of Us Part 2 off of me at one point.
I did.
And I saw that earlier this year. I think you were playing Part 1.
Yes.
So I was curious if you got around to Part 2 yet.
I have not got around to Part 2, and unfortunately, I do have some spoilers for Part 2, but not like context spoilers, so I'm still very interested in playing Part 2. I just know like the big stuff that happens, I think, or at least one of the big events. But I really enjoyed part 1. It took me a long time to play the first game because I started playing it many years ago, and honestly, sometimes zombie-esque games just aren't really my thing. Neither were shooters, but generally, like, I know I wanted to try it again because I like Naughty Dog stuff for the most part. So, yeah, I finished it. I think I finished the show and then I finished the game. And then my partner finished part 2, but I'm probably going to start part 2 in the new year.
Amy Lynn, have you watched the show or played either of the games?
Kind of similar to Ekami, like I don't super have a huge interest in zombie or shooter games, but I have watched the show. I enjoyed the show quite a bit. I have for part 2, I think I have the big early spoiler and I have the big late spoiler. But I am still interested in how, we get to that first spoiler and what leads to that final spoiler or that end spoiler. I don't think it's final. But yeah, I'm invested in the characters. I do prefer sort of the cordyceps idea of a zombie outbreak versus the undead, just because, if it was undead, winter would take care of a lot of that. But anyways, that just goes into my preferences in fiction. Yeah, so I'm interested in the show, not so much the game.
Well, when I played part 1, I didn't love it the first time I ever played it. When I played it on PS4, I played the remaster. And, I thought it was good. Like, I liked it enough, but I also didn't, I wasn't so into it that I was, waiting, chomping at the bit for part 2, which was still in development. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I started playing part 2, and actually I pre-ordered part 2, and then the pandemic happened right just after I pre-ordered it. So I couldn't get to the store that had my pre-order. It was in a mall, and the mall wasn't reopening.
Oh,
so
no.
They transferred my pre-order to another store far away from that store.
Oh,
and so I decided that, it got reviews and people were complaining on the internet, and I didn't read enough to know, why people were complaining about it. So I was just I still want to play it, but maybe not full price play it.
Right.
So I went out of my way to, I went and got the copy, and, I went out of my way to go get it, and at the same breath, I, took the copy from the clerk, and I said, okay, I'm returning this now. And they were like, what? You and I'm I tried to cancel this over the phone, but it didn't work. And I'd already paid for it, so to do the refund, I'd have to go in store. But so I returned that copy in the midst of a pandemic, going halfway across the city to do so, and then it went on sale for, I want to say, 30 or 40% off that just before the holidays, and I finally picked it up. And within an hour, I was like, why did I wait on this? I've since gone back to the first one, and I think the first one's also amazing, but the second one is one of my favorite games of all time. The twists you're talking about, which I won't spoil on the show, are they never bothered me. I was just so hooked. Yeah. I think every time something new happens and there's a development, and it's just and there's a trans character in it too. And at the time I was playing it, my egg had just cracked. I was just starting hormones, and even though the character is trans mask, everything they were saying and everything he was saying was so relatable. And there's these moments when you're walking around, and The Last of Us is Naughty Dog games are very environment based. So if you're walking past NPCs, they're talking about the characters, and you're stealthing around them. And there's a couple scenes where you're trying to sneak around people, and you've got this trans kid Lev is in tow with you, and you can hear them dead naming him, and you can hear them misgendering him and saying awful shit about him and talking about his transition, and it's trauma inducing, especially if that bothers you, but it just felt so visceral and so real. I was this is a really well made game. Anyway, It just if I didn't already like the game, that was the cementing of at least this is some real representation, because even in an apocalypse, of course, people are still assholes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. It was, and it's so interesting because it's interesting to talk about, because I've heard a good amount of just people being nah, this game is not great, the first one's better. And I was am I just listening to neckbeards just complaining about who's the main character of the game or something? I wasn't really sure. So now I kind of understand that for the most part. Yes, a lot of people who are complaining are just they're not really, in my opinion, founded. So I'm I'll play the game and I will see how I feel about it. I think I'm gonna enjoy the game for the most part. But yeah, it was interesting to hear that for sure for the second game. And like honestly, like for all the flack that I heard about it, like I mean, it took a few months maybe, but afterwards, like I have heard a lot of love for the game, which has been really nice too. So
I think anyone who's not an incel and they liked the first game will enjoy Last of Us Part 2. Whether it's the series, they're doing it as the series. Season 2 comes out. We're going to get to this, but Season 2 comes out next year. But which will be I think the first half of the second game.
Ooh, cool.
But yeah, if you like the first game and you're not an incel, like I said before, and I know there's probably going to be one person who listens to this and starts, typing away at their keyboard like, how dare you? Like, if you don't like the game for different reasons, that's cool.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Like if you hate the game because it's a like quote unquote woke, or you hate the game because of early game spoiler, then you're probably lost at that point, because those are the reasons to love the game, in my opinion. So, but let's move on to February, because we have a lot to get through, and that was just January. So February, we had Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out at the end of the month. We're not going like chronological in each month. I'm just going to go through the list of games based on how much we have to say about them. Have either of you played Rebirth yet, or are planning to?
No, I want to play the original Final Fantasy VII before I play like the newer games, and I know I don't have to. I just want to.
Fair.
I'm upset with that game for overshadowing my birthday.
No.
Aside from that, I've never played a numbered Final Fantasy. I own Final Fantasy 12, and it is in a sealed Toys R Us bag, back from when they used to seal bags. And the bag might have deteriorated by now, but it was really on sale for like under $10. So I'm like, of course I need to buy it. I have seen some Let's Plays. I am aware, like, Final Fantasy VII is such a big game in sort of the zeitgeist of video games, especially sort of the Japanese video games or the JRPG world, that, I'm definitely aware of a lot about Final Fantasy VII, even without playing it. I from what I've seen, I love what both of the games are doing to the original story. I think it's really creative. It's bold. I'm sure some people don't like it, but it looks amazing. If I had the time and the sort of interest in the legacy of the franchise, I'm sure I would play it and enjoy it, or the consoles that could run it. But yeah, I have a lot of, aside from, overshadowing my birthday, I have a lot of respect for the franchise. I was bitter about it when I was younger. When I saw video games live, I considered One Winged Angel like my own personal final boss that happened at the end of the concert, because I was so tired of One Winged Angel playing all the time. But I've kind of learned to accept it as the part of the pantheon.
So moving on to another release, Lake, which came out a few years ago on other consoles and PC, hit Nintendo Switch. The developer's called Gamius, I think is how you pronounce it, unless it's Gamius, but I think it's Gamius probably because like it's a clever play on the word game. This game has, which is called Lake, it has one sapphic romance option, which I know sounds like, just one, but like, I mean, for a game like this where like there's some options, I think it like even one is still like forward thinking more so than games that don't include it at all. But it's a cozy small town walking sim. It's so the summary from the Steam page is, it's 1986. Meredith Weiss takes a break from her career in the big city to deliver mail in her hometown. How will she experience 2 weeks in beautiful Providence Oaks with its iconic lake and quirky community? And what will she do next? It's up to you. So this game has been on my backlog for a while. I still haven't played it. I think I got it on Epic Games for like super cheap. And when they were still doing like the coupons, they'd put all the games on sale, and then they'd give you like unlimited use coupon codes as long as you bought everything separately. It was like on sale for $20, and then it was like if the game is over $14, you get like, I don't know, 20% off of it. So I think I got it for like $15 or something crazy like that at the time. But given that it's really hard to get Epic to run on your Steam Deck, I have not played it yet.
Fair. I'm in it as an interesting, I guess, note related to this. So I have not played the main game, but I have played the DLC for Lake.
How does that work?
So what it was I think I came across like a promotions on one of the websites that says like, hey, if you're a streamer or a content creator and you would like to stream a game, request a key and then we'll get back to you and maybe you'll get the game or the key or whatever. So I saw Lake Season's Greetings, which I believe was released last year, on that website, and I was like, well, this sounds cute. I had no idea it was DLC. I was like, this is like a cute little Christmas like game. Like you're going around, you play as this older gentleman who's delivering mail during the holidays, and I was like, this is adorable. I get to drive a postal truck. Sure, I'll request it. And so they were nice enough to give me the key, which I believe as a result came with the full game. So I was like, oh, there's a full game here. Oh, okay. And so at first I was like, oh my God, is it going to be weird if I've only played the DLC? Like, because I feel like I need to know the characters. But honestly, I played it on its own and it was just like a nice little aside. I believe like the older gentleman that you play as is the father of the protagonist of Lake. And like their daughter is coming for Christmas, but she's delayed and he's just delivering mail. And I think you as the protagonist maybe help him out in the main game or something. But yeah, I do also, I think I also know the romance option that you talked about, Zoe, because you also see her at the video shop that she runs in the game, in the DLC.
Oh my gosh, she runs a video store too?
Yeah, it's like,
this right now.
And I wholly recommend, like, when you get around to playing it, I'm assuming it's in the main game too, but the shop that she runs, like, when you get in there, take the time to read every single DVD on there, because they're all puns, and they're so good. They're phenomenal puns of, like, movies, of big movies. I think
these are all series of words that I really enjoy hearing.
It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I would recommend that wholly. And at some point, I'm probably going to play the main game. So.
So another thing that happened in February is that Pokémon Legends Z-A, and I think the actual pronunciation from the Pokemon Company International, even though the Japanese pronunciation is Z-A, the American pronunciation officially is Z-A. Pokemon content creators are not allowed to say Z-A. They're supposed to say Z-A. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting detail. It was announced in February on Pokemon Day, and it's coming out next year in 2025. This game is a follow-up of sorts to not just Legends Arceus, which came out a few years ago, but it's also a follow-up to the world of Pokemon X and Y, which is famous for having the series' first trans woman NPC. Which I think is interesting because everyone sees that picture of the screenshot of the woman who says she used to be a black belt karate person. And in the game, black belts can only be men. So the fact that this is a different trainer class who's female saying she used to be a black belt implies that she is transgender. But Did You Know Gaming actually had to look for this character because she is so deeply buried in a random side quest that they weren't even sure she was a real character until they found her. Anyway, I bring this up because I really hope that this Legends Z-A is going to have more of these kinds of characters, that maybe they'll sneak in this. We don't know when this game takes place. We don't know if it's a sequel to X and Y. We don't know if it's set in the 1900s or the 1800s during the Paris Restoration. But hopefully maybe this trans woman can show up if it's a sequel. I doubt that they will do that, but it would be cool if they, like, someone on the team was a little queer and decided to sneak her in again. But anyway, I would like to spend a lot of time talking about this, but we've spent a lot of time on other things. So I'm going to let Amy Lynn, I know you had something to say about this, and I'll let you say it, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
Yeah, not too much. Just that I feel that, unfortunately, it probably is only possible if it is a direct sequel, and she'll probably be hidden again. I would love sort of a different kind of trans representation, but because I don't want just the same sort of thing where, like, some character is just like, I used to be a hiker, or I guess hiker is now optional, or there's multi-sex hikers, but another male exclusive trainer class, but then be doing the same thing over again. I'd much rather it be like in a hidden dialogue option or something like that, but not super hopeful, but I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just kind of surprised we never heard anything about the game at all this year. So And sorry, I don't mean to rush you either. I know there's only a few things here where you had specific notes on things to say, but I just was realizing the time of how much we've talked already. And I was like, we're only on February. I'm like, we got to get going. So there might be a few things I cut out as we go that are maybe a little less queer focused that I included just to pad things out. But this next thing I think is super interesting. And it's our last thing for February is that, and I found this on Gaming Mag, which I mentioned earlier, but the first ever GLAAD gaming report confirms video games still lag behind with LGBTQ plus inclusion. Cue shocked faces, gasps. So I'm just going to read some quotes here, and then we can talk about them. I just want to get through these quotes because there's some very interesting stats in here. So they said that key findings that were that 1 in 5, so 17% of active video game players are LGBTQ plus, and the number has increased by 70% from the 10% counted in the 2020 Nielsen Games 360 survey. So in 4 years, they've counted more LGBTQ plus players. I feel like the survey was probably just more accurate this time than it was suddenly more queer people are playing video games. But they then said, however, this level of inclusion is not reflected in video games themselves, according to the report, and based on publicly available tags and lists that highlight queer inclusive content. Less than 2% of games on major consoles and PC include LGBTQ plus characters. What's particularly interesting is that most LGBTQ plus gamers, 39% compared to LGBTQ, oh my god, I'm going to just say queer. This is why I don't say the acronym on the show. It's just, I get tongue-tied. Mm-hmm. Queer gamers at 32% play on a Nintendo console. Again, cue shocked faces and gasps. Yet that platform was found to have the lowest percentage of available games, which include queer characters and or storylines. Again, cue shocked faces. Nintendo games don't have queer characters? You mean the one trans character in Nintendo is buried in a in a side quest? As for genre, most LGBTQ plus gamers prefer to play RPGs, simulation, horror, and or puzzle games. Again, cue shock faces.
Oh me.
This is in direct contrast to heterosexual counterparts who have a preference for shooters. Again, anyway.
That surprised Pikachu is getting a workout.
Yeah, he's busy. But both groups share an interest in multiplayer and co-op games. What GLAAD's report also found was that despite video games lagging behind in comparison to TV and film, the support for more queer inclusion was mostly regarded as a positive. As stated in the report, 7 out of 10 non-queer gamers said learning a main character in the game is queer would either positively influence or make no difference to their likelihood to buy or play the game. Again, I am not shocked there. Well, I guess I am shocked, but not sarcastically. On the other hand, LGBTQ plus gamers were not only more interested to buy and play a game with queer representation and characters, but the report states that nearly 3 out of 4 say seeing characters with their gender identity or sexual orientation represented well in a game makes them feel better about themselves. Also, both large margins of queer and non-queer gamers agree that they appreciate how gaming allows them to experience perspectives of people different from themselves, 80% and 67% respectively. Okay, that's all for the stats. I'm sorry, listeners, that you had to hear that because my guests are actually able to read this from the show notes and follow along. So I do apologize, but I'm curious what your thoughts are because I have many, of course, but I want to hear from you guys.
I mean, it's certainly a lot of that feels not so surprising for me. I mean, a little disheartening just because it's, if there's less representation, like I mean, I agree that I would love to see like someone with more so like my gender identity, sexual orientation, like that would just be really cool to see and like see that that recognized. I do agree that at the very least, for me, it's difficult to come across like discover new queer games. I want more, and maybe I need to explore, different websites to help with that. It's kind of sometimes rare for me, or rarer, I guess, more rare to find a game that's like promoting that. Indie games are wonderful sources for a lot of this, and I've seen far more indie games like bring these to light with their characters, which is really cool. But yeah, I think that's most of my thoughts. And also, yes, to puzzle games and RPGs, 100%, that's me.
Yeah, I feel that, sort of echoing what Ekami was saying about the indie game scene, I feel that has a huge part of it, and I think it can be seen reflected on like the indie comic scene being very queer focused. If you look at indie animation, even the sort of semi-indie animations like your Has-Been Hotels or Amazing Digital Circuses, where they have queer themes, but are on sort of more mainstream platforms. I think we're getting a lot of similar types of things in video games, which is amazing. And the absence of explicitly queer elements, especially like in something like a Nintendo game, I think is also partly, Japan is not as progressive in a lot of ways compared to North America and Europe, other places in Oceania, etc. But yeah, I think it is more or less really good news and really heartening to hear, because I found that in all media, I am most excited about, either queer curated or created or games with that 2S LGBT themes. And I'm sure that we've had episodes on True Avatars, and we will, or at least you will have episodes in the future that deal with, all of those sort of queer icons that aren't explicitly queer, but sort of mean something to the gay and trans community and everyone within sort of the queer and trans umbrellas. I think about, characters like Bayonetta or like Samus, where like Samus especially being, really connected to the trans femme community, or, linked to both trans femmes and trans masks, and non-binary people. There are so many non-explicitly queer characters that are still adopted, and within that sort of Nintendo world, I think that's great, and that's not going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. The article also noted this, so this isn't exactly an original thought, but the part of the report that said 7 out of 10 non-queer gamers learning a main character in the game is queer would either positively influence or make no difference on their likelihood to buy or play a game. That's reassuring for me to hear, because sometimes it feels like Twitter and Reddit and pretty much anywhere that gamers, quote unquote, talk about games. It's the second, like right now, they just revealed the new Naughty Dog game, and people are mad that there's a woman who shaves her head on camera, like on screen.
Oh my God,
and
really?
It's just kind of like, if they're not okay with a straight woman shaving her head, like obviously they're gonna, like a queer character is gonna make them lose their freaking minds, right? So it's nice to know that these people are a minority. And that just because they're the loudest voices doesn't mean that they're the most common voices. So that is reassuring. Moving right along to March.
I will say that I could probably take an episode talking about that survey. Like I think it's really interesting, but I know we have a timeline to get through.
Well, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should go through the whole, because there's more to it than just what I read too. So maybe if listeners are, I haven't really gotten a single comment on the show yet. I've gotten one rating, and some listeners obviously. But if you do have a way to get in touch with me and you want to hear an episode where we talk about that, we can absolutely do an episode on this survey, even though it's a year old. It doesn't have to be something that's like of the week to talk about it. So I've just been doing of the week because I assume people want to hear the most recent stuff. But we absolutely can do that. But we do have to get on to March, because we've been talking for 35 minutes, or at least close to 35 minutes according to my timer, and we are only just getting to March. So first things up is Horizon Forbidden West hit PC. People are wondering, Aloy is a sapphic character. It's not confirmed that she's a lesbian. It's not confirmed that she's bisexual, but we do know that she is at least sapphic in nature.
Yeah, the community really adopts that really well. And also, I love Aloy. She's so great.
Me too. Chia came to PC in March, and then later in the year it came to Switch and Xbox. I think in different months. It didn't release at the same time, but the developer is an indie developer called Awaseb, and they're from New Caledonia. And Awaseb is New Caledonian slang that roughly translates to "it's all good" or "no worries," and that comes from their website. I didn't
That's so
research
sweet.
that myself.
I love
but
that.
Yeah. Chia herself is a sapphic character who identifies as queer. And the summary about the game is, I think this is either from the Steam page or from the website, is a tropical open-world adventure. Climb, glide, swim, and sail your boat around a beautiful archipelago in this physics-driven sandbox. take control of any animal or object you can find, and jam on your fully playable ukulele. So I don't know if either of you have heard of Chia or played it. It's a game that's been on my wish list for a long time, but it is open world. So first I was waiting for the Steam release because it was an Epic Game Store exclusive, and I was like, I'm not playing it there. Sorry, I'm not playing it there because I can't get Epic to run on my Steam Deck, and I don't play on my PC that often. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait for Steam. And then when Steam was announced, they were like, oh, there's a Switch release coming shortly after that. And I was like, well, I really like playing on my Switch. And I was like, okay, I'll wait for the Switch release. And then the Switch release came out, and it's a Switch game. It doesn't run great. Yeah. So at that point, at that point, it was summer, and I was busy with other things, and I was like, it's an open world game. I just played Tears of the Kingdom. I'm kind of burnt out on open world games. So at this point, I'm just like waiting for like a good time to like sit down with an open world game like this to play it. And it hurts my soul a little bit that I'm saying this about an indie game and not like a Tears of the Kingdom, for example, because I want to support it, but at the same time, like, you know, it just worked out that way. So I do recommend, though, from everything I've seen about this, it looks amazing, and you should go play it.
Yeah. I remember seeing trailers for it. I actually had no idea that the protagonist, Chia, is a sapphic character who identifies as queer. That's awesome. And I think, like, I remember from the trailer, looks super colorful, looks really fun. I don't always get as engaged with open world sandboxy kind of games. But I feel like I think there's probably a demo I could try. So I might just play a demo and just like see how I feel about it. Everything you've just mentioned to me sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. So I'm probably going to check it out.
Emilyn, any thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, so I'm moving on. Stardew Valley 1.6 update hits PC. At the time, consoles still had no date, and it took a lot longer than people expected. We'll get to that later in the show, though. But so part of the update was a new farm layout. They introduced the mastery system for increasing your skills after you max them out. So kind of like a new game plus, it sounds like. New events and festivals. They added turtles as pets, which I didn't even know until like I was looking up for the show. And I was like, wait, I've been sleeping on this update all year. For listeners who don't know, I have a pet turtle named Kiwi and a pet leopard gecko named Mango. Which is why I hope they add the geckos eventually. That'd be cool. But the fact that they added turtles it's really cute. And the big thing that I thought was really cool, so this actually is kind of a bit loaded, but they added all clothing options and made them available to both genders. So there's still no non-binary gender option. It seems to be a bit of a contentious point between the fans and the developer. So there were some quotes in the Gaming Mag article that I found that they pulled from Twitter. So someone said, I'm excited for the Stardew update generally, brackets, haven't had a chance to play yet since I play on Switch, but like many others, I'm really disappointed with Concerned Ape's silence on adding non-binary and pronoun options to the game. That came from Twitter user Haley on the social media platform. Something like that, she said, or they said, I should say, something like that shouldn't fall to mods. And actually, the pronouns might actually be not they, them. So I messed up. So I'll own that. But then the next person said, what has further exacerbated the situation is that the 1.6 update does include fixes for mods. For example, one change is that, quote, non-binary NPCs can now pathfind through any gendered route, e.g. men's or women's locker room, instead of defaulting to female routes, end quote. This leads people to assume that Concerned Ape does know of the demand for non-binary options.
That's interesting. I actually just recently played, I picked up Stardew Valley again after a little while because my partner and I are playing on PlayStation 5. I didn't know that the NPCs could pathfind. That's interesting. Huh. I mean, I would like to, like, it would be nice to see those options presented. I know that Concerned Ape does a whole ton of work, I think mostly by themselves or himself, just doing the updates, and they certainly take time because I know the console one, I think that 1.6 update came out November 4th, I think, which was quite a bit after. Yeah, it was quite a bit after like the PC or the PC one that was first. So yeah, that I honestly, I'm more so kind of surprised. I feel like because I don't know. I guess I just would consider that could be just like a really easy thing to add, like for the pronoun options and non-binary options. But Yeah.
I don't want to understate. Like, I do feel that it is possible. It is a rather complicated technical thing with, like, you know, all the character interactions and dialogue trees and things like that. Like,
That's
it
true.
does seem like it is very possible that it is, especially for a game with, you know, custom characters. It could be challenging. I don't doubt that. But I do feel that, especially given the sort of fan base of the game, it is a little bit weird that it hasn't been a priority. But yeah, it very well could be a very challenging process. I think I've heard that it is. Just hearsay on social media from other developers saying that, you know, it is a bit of a challenging, you know, process, but it seems like something that, you know, I would have focused on, but I'm kind of biased there.
Well, it sounds too like, I mean, it probably when ConcernedApe made the game, I imagine it doesn't sound like it was necessarily a consideration at the start. But like, so I think back to like maybe in hindsight, maybe ConcernedApe really wants to now, but what you're saying of, like, you know, different character interactions and how difficult that could be with how many options there are, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that. And especially because I've heard ConcernedApe, like, I mean, it seems like a one-person show with, like, all of ConcernedApe's projects. So, and I think that's by choice. I don't think ConcernedApe wants to, like, be a part of a bigger team and, like, make a studio. But I could be wrong about that. I think that's just what I've heard. So that could be more difficult with one person doing it, is what I was thinking.
I think we'll know for sure when Haunted Chocolatier finally gets some more details or releases. If you can choose, if there's character creation in that game and you still can't choose non-binary characters. I think that game's only been in development for the last couple of years. So it's been in development recently enough that I think ConcernedApe would have definitely understood the demand for non-binary pronoun options and non-binary character creation options. So if Haunted Chocolatier doesn't have it, then it's clearly like a feigned ignorance on his part. But we don't know yet because that game is still years away.
Yeah.
Moving on, Death of a Wish, an indie game, hits PC and Nintendo Switch. The developer is called Me Less Than 3. So this is a hack and slash game with Souls-like inspiration. It's a spiritual successor to another game called Luca, Born of a Dream. So the official summary is that you play as Luca, a furious young man who is trying to destroy the oppressive religious order that raised him. There are 4 sanctum faiths that he must destroy if he wants to accomplish this: father, sister, cardinal, and priest. Along the way, he encounters new allies that share his goal of creating something new from the rubble of the current regime.
I think that's you play as Christian, right?
Yes.
Okay, you said you play as Luca.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
Yeah, all good.
Me getting my wires crossed, reading a very big block of text that has no spaces.
All good.
So the only detail I know, I wasn't able to find a ton on this game without just playing it.
Yep.
And I did not have time to play it, but I did see that Christian and the other, quote, marked children these characters are queer in this game. So this is a game about, you know, fighting religious oppression, obviously, but also religious oppression of your queer identity.
This was really interesting to read about just ahead in the show notes because I have actually played this game many months ago. I haven't finished it. I don't think I'm far in it at all, to be honest. This was another one of those games that I saw that was advertised on one of the websites that says, hey, if you want to stream the game and promote it, like, ask for a key. So this was like Season's Greetings, one of the games that I requested and was chosen and was given the key for very graciously. And it was just really interesting reading these notes because, and I guess I'm probably going to at myself a little bit because I'm pretty sure either I didn't play enough of it or my memory is just hecking awful, like just so awful that I don't remember a large piece of this game. But I don't recall if it was blatantly said that Christian and the Mark children are queer. I definitely got the feeling that, well, the idea that they're fighting like the church, basically his father I think I interpreted his father to be a priest or someone just of the faith, and he was definitely being oppressed, and his father was not a good person at all. It's a really great game for like visually representing emotions like rage, depression, just like really strong emotions from what I played of it. And while I don't think it necessarily would be a game that is something I would play just in terms of gameplay. I play a little bit of hack and slash, but not a whole lot. It was so interesting, and now I really want to go back to it and keep that idea in mind of like the queer themes, and like maybe it'll be more apparent to me. So either when I played it, either I didn't play enough of it to really get that idea across, either I have totally forgotten about, like, because this was months and months ago, that there were these themes present, or I just, it was just flying by my head and I just was not understanding that. Like the religious oppression was definitely there, but I really, now that you've talked about it, I really do want to go back and replay it with that in mind.
So it could just be something that's stated more to be thematic, or something that's like almost implied but not like explicitly stated. However, the one review I found that was like in depth that I found, and it comes from a website called indiehellzone.com. It is linked here in the show notes, but I should mention that this is part of my source. Down the page in the review, there is one sentence here that says, "Meanwhile, Christian and other marked children are explicitly stated to be queer. Their marks symbolic and literal in the eyes of the church." So maybe it's just you haven't gone far enough. Maybe it's memory. Like I don't know. I haven't played it, so I'm only going by this review. In my scramble to find all these games, and again, I did this while also working on the podcast that I released last week. I did this while working on the podcast for the Game Awards, and I was watching the Game Awards last week, and I was doing many. I've been very busy the last week, so I didn't put as much research into each individual checkbox here, or not checkbox, but like bullet point as I would have liked to. But I did find this before. At least I'm citing something before I said that, because when you said that, I was like, yeah, how do I know that? Why do I think that? And so anyway, I did find it here that it says that. But
yeah, and I appreciate that. Like, I honestly was I remember reading the show notes and I was like, how did I miss that? Like, I must have not like played far enough. I know that I found it a very difficult game. I don't know if I can't remember if there's difficulty levels in it, but I remember like dying a whole lot. And then when you die, you restart. It's like it's that kind of idea. Yeah. I mean, I think you have like a certain number of lives that you can restart from the previous thing, but like, as in like, hey, I reached a checkpoint, I have 2 more tries to get past that checkpoint, or I just restart the game. I think that was the vibe, but yeah, I'm inspired to go back to it.
So moving on though, because I know Amy Lynn has some thoughts on this saga as well. And actually, I feel like I missed this saga when it happened this year. And maybe in some ways I'm glad I did miss it, because it was quite the drama. But Dead by Daylight added, I said that really weird. Dead by Daylight added a new character called the Unknown, who was voiced by a trans woman. And at first this probably sounds like a good thing, because, a game featuring a trans voice actor is like, that's generally awesome. A good thing.
Yeah.
But it kind of backfired. It led to harassment by a vocal minority, as we discussed before, on the internet. The article from Gaming Mag, which I pulled, said the Unknown, alongside its survivor counterpart Sable Ward, released with several cosmetics. Its main cosmetic is an elongated figure with a long neck, a twisted face, and is for the most part masculine in nature. A variant of cosmetics, however, has the same shape, but has the Unknown wearing a cheerleader outfit with long hair. The variant is meant to represent a victim of the Unknowns, but unfortunately it has been used to incite transphobic hatred towards Dead by Daylight players and streamers. As shared by Pink News, this hatred also led to targeting the Unknown's voice actor, who is a trans woman. The actor, which we will not name to protect her identity, shared in a now deleted thread on social media platform Twitter that they felt they were owed reparations from the team after feeling tricked by the inclusion of these skins. Since then, the actor, I'm once again mixing up 2 sentences here. Since then, the actor has clarified their initial statement. I wasn't kept in the loop with what the character's final look would be. I was given an ambiguous description for the part, and even though I tried my best to find out, continually asking for more info, that wasn't possible, and this is why I was upset. The skins themselves were never the issue. The lack of communication was. So Amy Lynn, you have thoughts on this, and since I don't, I would like to defer to you.
The main thoughts is just how scummy the developers were here. As the actor sort of said, like, as sort of unfortunate as the skins were and the, I guess, aesthetics and the visuals in general, the lack of communication here, like, it just, I don't know if it reeks of overt transphobia or just, yeah, again, being kind of scummy, like not communicating what the character is going to look like when trans representation is such a sensitive issue. I think there's nothing wrong having like a zombie trans character or, you know, even a scary trans villain. But when we have a generally like elongated masculine figure wearing a cheerleader outfit, essentially, like it's such like a bad call. And like it could have, I don't think, unlikely, it could have been done by accident. This could have been, you know, just people like ignorance rather than like something malicious. But it's become something malicious, unfortunately, and it's led to malicious things.
Sorry, I was gonna ask, do you know about the other skins and if they were like other characters that were also the unknown was also dressed up as, or was it just the cheerleader outfit?
No, I mean the answer is I don't know. All of what I saw when this was happening were kind of the base model and then the cheerleader one, because those were the kind of ones being discussed. I will say I was a little bit disappointed because when I initially heard the unknown, I thought it was the Willy's Chocolate Experience character, the unknown, also from this past year, but a different character, unfortunately. But that's kind of what drew me to the, well, actually, no, it's what re-drew me to the controversy later on. But yeah,
I just looked up a picture and I can see why this was controversial. Like the description makes me think like, oh, this big black kind of masculine, like a dark black, like a rotting skin almost is what I'm imagining. Just like something zombie-like where the flesh is kind of peeling off and just like kind of a void almost is what I mean when I say that. But looking at it right now, it looks like a PS2 like deformed woman, man dressed as a woman. It's fucked up.
Yeah, I'm just
and not in like a
now.
scary way.
Yeah, that feels definitely like a hey, this just like they I imagine they didn't really know what they were doing, but they didn't like really. It looks like it was like a design that just wasn't really okayed by a team. Like they were just like, you know what, this works, and then they just didn't review it.
This is why it's important to have queer people on development teams if you have a team big enough to be called a team, I guess, essentially. Or like have like equivalent of sensitivity readers, have or just be thoughtful and mindful yourself. Like this could have easily been avoided. You could have done something similar without causing like a ruckus, but it's just a sad state of affairs.
Sorry, I'm just looking up to confirm the names of... Okay, so you mentioned having people on your team, but like you can just do what Steve-O did on one of the Jackass movies. And he walked through a cash register, a checkout, and he saw a trans woman. It was the day before he was supposed to get breast augmentation done as a joke. And he saw a trans woman behind the counter, and he said he identified her based on a pin or something, like he didn't just assume. But anyway, it was so long ago that this story happened that it doesn't really matter. But the point is, he said like, hey, can I run some questions by you? Because like I'm going to do this thing for Jackass. And she kind of like just gently told him like, this is probably a bad idea and here's why. And like at this point, if you have to crowdsource your queer inclusion, I would prefer that, even though I prefer queer people to be paid as consultants. Go find your local cashier and ask her, what the fuck, man? Because, I mean, if Steve-O can do it and he's like, look, I'm not going to say Steve-O's a good or a bad person, but like, I mean, based on this story, I think he's a good person, but like, he's a jackass, literally. And I don't mean that as a joke. Like, he's kind of an asshole, and that's like kind of his gimmick. So if he can
his job
do this,
title.
If he can do it,
if he can go
so
and do
can
this,
you.
like you can too. So, so let's breeze through April and May super quick because there isn't too much. Well, May there's a little bit to talk about, but April, a game came out called Voice Love on Air. And I'm not sure if this is shovelware, if I'm being honest, but it is queer. It's from a developer called Soft Star Entertainment. I do not think they're an indie studio. But the summary goes as this. Finding love isn't easy, but for Voice Love on Air protagonist Aki, love is the only thing that matters if he wants his new recording studio to succeed. Aki, a newbie voice director who wants to branch out and fulfill their wish of owning their very own studio, has the difficult choice of trying to wrangle several voice actors to complete the BL, boy love dramas he has planned. Thankfully, Aki's ability to hear a person's true feelings from their voice alone will help him in pursuing his goals. They're going back and forth on pronouns here. Along the way, Aki will meet several voice actors and will have the opportunity to form a romantic relationship with him throughout the game's story. And I'm pretty sure there is some homosexual love options in the story. Didn't look into it too deeply, but I did see that it came up as an article briefly on Gaming Mag, so I thought it was worth talking about. But I would like to move on since I don't know a lot about this.
That's
I
fair.
would like to move on to May and talk about Hades 2. Came onto early access on PC, released in early access from Supergiant Games. And that game is based on gods and mythical characters, many of which are inherently queer and always have been. And the game leans into that, of course. But the big one I want to talk about, because I feel like most of our listeners, again, everyone loves Nintendo games, and the only confirmed by the Japanese devs, because there's another character, another Mario character that's transgender, and that's Birdo or
Right.
Birdetta.
Yeah.
But again, that's only in the I think in the U.S. manual. I don't think the Japanese manual has that.
Oh, interesting.
But in Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, the Japanese writers of that game did 20 years ago to this original release add a trans character who is a party member named Vivian, if I'm getting that right. I've literally only just met her in the story in my playthrough. But they remastered the game this year and released it, and it looks gorgeous. I know there were some issues with the frame rate where they dropped the frame rate from 60 down to 30, but otherwise it looks like a really pretty game, and I don't think the frame rate is anything to worry about. But the game has a trans character named Vivian, and her transgender identity is pretty important to her story because she's part of a group called oh my god, I can't remember their names, but they're called the Sisters of sorts. And they don't like to be called the Sisters because they don't like Vivian to be called a girl. But she actually says in one of her first lines, she's like, "It makes me feel really nice when you call me one of your sisters," which is the most relatable thing I've ever heard in a Mario game in my entire life from a guy who stomps mushrooms in space. So, yeah. Any thoughts on this one? Maybe Amy Lynn, you want to go first?
I think this is like such a great, like, I want to call it like a victory. I want to call it like a feel-good story. There's so much that makes me feel happy about this, from, you know, things being, I guess, like ambiguous in the past, at least from a North American angle, to all like the controversy and people, like, you know, the usual suspects arguing on social media that, oh, you just don't understand Japanese culture, Vivian's not really trans. Like, you know, having it be in the English release and other language releases now, it's vindication as well. Vivian's a cute character, just by, you know, character design. Just really happy. It's nice to get a win.
Yeah, there was some debate about just before the game released whether or not they would preserve that. And there was even a potential leak that Nintendo of America was trying to censor her to avoid the controversy.
Really?
Which really sounds typical of Nintendo of America, especially if you listen to how Kit and Krista talk. I have my thoughts on them, but it doesn't surprise me that the U.S. The U.S. Side of things would be much more in tune with where this controversy would go, whereas Japan might be like, well, we're just telling the story as it originally was, and then they ended up localizing it and actually making it clearer that she was transgender. I think they did change one little detail, but it was in favor of making sure the transphobia was still in the game. I remember seeing people on Twitter celebrating that the game had transphobia in it, and it was kind of a meme because it's so central to her character arc. So
That's awesome.
But anyway, I feel like everyone's been hearing about Paper Mario all year, and everyone knows that there's a trans character in there. And we have a lot more months to get through. So moving into June, and I'm sorry here, I didn't include a lot of notes about this game in the show notes. But I did look up the Steam page here so I could talk a little bit more about it. But In June, a game called Psychroma released from developers who are queer and based in Toronto called Rocket Adrift. So their game Psychroma is a psychological horror side-scroller set in a haunted cyberpunk house. Collect cards and explore the memories stored on them to piece together your past. But the deeper you go, the more you expose yourself to the brightest heat, the warmest color, ... And that's not ... like the summary continues, but I'm not clicking on it. It means like, I'm pretty sure that's actually, you know what? I don't actually know the answer to that question. I should probably find that out because it sounds like it's supposed to be ominous, but I'm actually not 100% sure. No, that is correct. It's supposed to be an ellipses there. And then it goes into like more of the details from the game. But this has a really cool art style. Creeps me out a little bit. It reminds me a little bit here about of Five Nights at Freddy's, just a little bit. There's one screenshot here.
Really?
That just screams Freddy to me. I'm sure that's not intentional. They're just both kind of based on a similar aesthetic, but and I don't have opinions one way or the other about Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm just trying to give people a visual here, but it's got lots of pretty colors. It's got a very psychedelic look to it in some places, and then you've got this cyberpunk bleakness to it as well. Now, I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm actually going to play this game. And I might or might not be in touch with someone who might be in touch with Rocket Adrift to get them on this show next year. Hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, I will still be talking about the game. I still plan to play it. I would like to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Psychroma. So. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I'm super pumped for that. I know I'm acquaintances with someone who their friend is one of the devs or they're a part of Rocket Adrift. So they were really excited. They were like, oh, you should check out this game. And so I think I've downloaded the demo and I would like to, I'll be playing it pretty soon, but everything about it is very much like my vibe. So I'm like, yes, I'm so excited to play this. I'm so interested to see like how the narrative is like what the narrative style is, because I feel like it's going to be one of those really cool like symbolic, really artsy kind of like, this is what's happening, but is it reality or is it, some hallucination or something? And it seems in a kind of like a cyberpunk kind of world. So yeah, anyway, I'm just super excited for Psychroma.
Well, I'm going to get you on the show and we're both going to, once we've both played it, we'll talk about it together.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Emilyn, did you have any thoughts?
Not in particular, but similarly, it sounds cool.
So let's move on to the next one. And I feel like this is also right up Ekami's alley.
It is.
I don't know if you've played it, but Stray Gods Orpheus, developer Summerfall Studios. It had some DLC this year from 2023's Stray Gods, the role-playing musical. So like it's an RPG musical, which just screams Ekami to me. As soon as I saw this, I was like,
yeah.
If you haven't played this yet, I'd be shocked.
I have played the demo of the game and I really want the game, but yeah.
Fair. So actually, it also has kind of an all-star cast. It has Erika Ishii, who is also going to be in Ghost of Yotei. Erika Ishii is gender fluid with all pronouns. And also it features Anthony Rapp from Rent. So the summary for this game is gods, romance, murder, musical numbers. Play as Grace in a world where Greek gods live in hiding among us. Change your fate as you draw friends, foes, and lovers into song using your powers of musical persuasion to unravel the mystery of the last muse's death. And the DLC summary is as follows. Play as Orpheus in this brand new story for Stray Gods, the role-playing musical. Orpheus' story is arguably finished, until Hermes brings him back to the world of the living. With their help, you'll guide Orpheus through the depths of mortal decision-making, who to date, what to hope for, what instrument to rock out on. So this sounds pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The demo was so much fun for the main game. And I actually heard about this one through a celebrity that I follow on Instagram named Rahul Kohli, who's done a lot of like the Mike Flanagan shows, like Bly Manor, not Hill House, Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, and anyway, he's just a really fun person. So he plays the Minotaur, and I don't know if he sings, but oh my god, I hope he does, because I just want to hear this man sing, because I'm sure he's great. But yeah, then I looked into it later, and I was like, Laura Bailey's in this, Troy Baker's in this, like Felicia Day. That's like it's all these really like cool people that I enjoy basically all of their content. Yeah, it was really cool. It's like a it's like a comic style. It's like you're playing it's like you're reading a comic, but it's an audiobook as well, so you're visually seeing all of these cool like animated sequences that are light animations because they're like a comic strip, but then you have this wonderful music going on. Everybody sang great in the demo. There's choices involved, so like from what I remember, you could, if you choose one path, then you get to learn more about a character that you might not know about. If you went to the other path, you might miss out on some songs. Like it's really interesting. Yeah, I really badly want this game.
Amy Lynn, any thoughts?
I'd like to mostly state that Anthony Rapp is from Star Trek Discovery, not from Rent. He is also, but I'm just saying from my perspective, this is the engineer from Star Trek. The concept, like I love when musicals are added to other genres and things, in this case games. So yeah, this is yet another game on the show notes list that was not on my radar that sounds really awesome.
Yeah, I'm actually not 100% sure about platforms. I know it's definitely on PC. This feels like something that will, if it's not already on Switch, will probably be coming to Switch. It seems like the perfect kind of game for it. So but we have to move along because there is still a lot to cover, and we have been talking for a while. And tonight we have to record a second podcast. So I just want to note here that in June is when IGN has their Summer of Gaming, and they also do something called, and I didn't hear about this even when it was happening, so maybe it flew under the radar, I just missed it, or maybe they're just not promoting it enough because IGN's audience is a little hardcore gamer, but, they do something called the Gaming Awards, GAY Gaming, and this year they did the 2024 ones, but
yes.
So that's something to note for next year. I'm sure they'll probably do it again unless it was a complete bomb. I have my own issues with IGN. It's not so much with their reporting. I actually think their journalists are very, very clever. Rebecca Valentine in particular, I think, breaks some very interesting stories. Kat Bailey as well.
Nice.
I highly recommend going to listen to them on Nintendo Voice Chat when they're on.
Oh, cool.
They're super cool. So is Jada Griffin.
Nice.
My issue with IGN is actually right now is the people in charge who are making the unions work much harder because they unionized this year. I just want to note that because I know a lot of people like to shit on IGN, and even though they have a lot of articles that are like obviously clickbait, but what website doesn't, my issues are with management and not with the journalists who are actually doing amazing work. And they broke a pretty big story this year too. Rebecca Valentine broke a story about Double Exposure, the new Life is Strange game, cool. having development issues that were particularly misogynistic and queer-phobic from a lead developer.
Interesting.
So anyway.
No, that's fair.
Yes.
I actually did watch the Gaming Awards, like IGN's, a few months ago when it released. Like I watched the recording, I think, because I'll fully admit I only really heard about them because I'm following the dev for In Stars in Time, and that game got nominated for one of the categories. So I was like, I'll just watch the whole thing. There's a couple games on there that I feel like they deserved their win. In particular, there's a game called Thirsty Suitors that I know that won Best Indie. And even though that was also the category that In Stars in Time was up for, I immediately then watched the trailer for Thirsty Suitors and I was like, oh, I need to play this game. This looks like so much fun. So yeah, they were fun. But it's something that I'm definitely going to keep on my radar for next year so that I can just know when they're happening. And and then before we move on to July as well, I also wanted to quickly mention there is one game that also released in June called Tavern Talk. And while I have not played the full game yet, I did play the extended demo, and the devs have been super nice in just like communicating with me about like DLC and new stuff coming up. It is very basically coffee talk-esque in terms of like you're running like
I'm sold.
You're running an inn, a pub, like kind of like a medieval fantasy kind of vibe, and different you meet different characters who come and order a drink, and it's
I already have my credit card out. You don't have to keep selling it. Okay.
But so it's so much fun. The demo was a lot of fun, and the first patron at least from the demo, that comes into the inn and talks to you, who I believe is like your friend. Maybe you've met recently, but they talk to you as if you're very familiar. They use they them pronouns, which is super cool. I don't know anything else about the character other than that they're like a cool little elf person. But yeah, they're.
I'm taking one look at the picture, and this game is fucking gay. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
the
Oh,
queerest
yeah, yeah,
game
yeah.
I've ever played. It's more queer than Coffee Talk already, I can tell.
Yeah, so I know that recently they released like as in recently from this when we're recording in November, they released a DLC called Tavern Talk Tempest Tantrum. So definitely gonna play this game very soon because I loved Coffee Talk, and the demo for this was like super cool. And like honestly, the devs are like some of the nicest people that I follow. Like they're just so kind. Oh, and they also they're really good on social media about like promoting other projects from their friends and from just like people around. Like they'll do like a feature Friday kind of thing, and they'll just talk about just like different indie games.
Ooh,
and
can you ask them if they'll promote the podcast, especially if you told them I'll even highlight the game if they'll
we can
promote the podcast.
man, if I could talk about, I will play the game, and I would gladly, you know what, we got a plan. I'm gonna reach out to them.
Cool. Okay, so as much as I would like to keep talking about that, we do have to move through the podcast. We're going to breeze through July. I'm just going to mention that Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail expansion came out. I know it's got a huge queer fan base. I have no idea if there's any queer content in the game. I have to guess probably not, but we're going to move straight on to August. So August, Star Wars Outlaws came out, and I know I've been talking about this in a bunch. I talked about this in the Game Awards podcast that I recorded yesterday, and I was like, this is a queerish game. If you missed the episode where I talked about this initially, it has a few queer characters in it, like NPCs. It's not a queer heavy game, but I did include it when I was talking about queer games because I also know we had June and Black on, and she worked on the game, and she is herself transgender. So I thought it was worth including as a queer game, if only from adding one more little checkbox to saying, hey, there's a queer game that was nominated, but I do consider it to be a queer game. Borderlands 4 was teased at Gamescom opening night live, and then finally a game called Kitsune Tales launched on PC. And I know this was a game that Amy Lynn was very interested in talking about. And I think, Ekami, you also said you were excited for it too?
To be honest, I hadn't heard about it, but like until now, but going through the show notes, I read what you wrote, and then I went to Steam and I wishlisted it.
Nice. Okay, so I'll just quickly go through this and then we can talk about it because I would like to highlight it because it looks super adorable. It comes from Kitsune Games. A retro-inspired platformer about a young woman, Yuzu, played by Kira Buckland, who voices 2B in Nier, in a love triangle with two other women. The story is that a kitsune must rescue her sort of girlfriend after she's kidnapped by another jealous woman, which is fucking, like, it's wild to me that there's a game that has that because, like, you just don't see that. You just don't. So the features from the website that they mention is that there's classic platforming action set in a land inspired by Japanese mythology, explore 5 elemental worlds and various haunted houses, use cute outfits to power up, uncover the reasons behind your childhood friend's jealous betrayal, stomp on pangos to make them curl into a ball, pick them up and kick them around. That's not very nice. Carry lights through haunted houses to reveal secret doors and ward off ghosts, unlock and play over half a dozen minigames for coins and power-ups. Struggling? Buy more power-ups at the shop or change playstyles for an instant revive. Play through the bonus world after rolling credits and prove you've got what it takes to beat the Kaizo levels. Optional true-to-life CRT filter for maximum nostalgia.
Nice.
Make custom levels using mature open source tools. Create and play custom minigames using the same Lua scripting the developers used. Okay, that's all the features that were listed that I included. I think there might have been a couple more on the list, but I thought those were all the really cool ones, and we'd be here forever if I listed them all. But anyway, Amy Lynn, you had thoughts. I would like you to share them.
Yeah, just what, like, a huge, ambitious game. Like, that, like, everything that you just listed sounds amazing, and the fact that, you know, there's a sapphic love triangle as, like, the main sort of plot or, like, the main starting point to the game. It is also interesting that, like, I found that, like, kitsunes have been, like, weirdly sapphic lately. I mean, I'm not complaining, but it's not the first time I've kind of seen that come up. But yeah, like I don't have a whole lot to, like, say other than, like, it sounds so great, and, like, just all those features that you mentioned. again, kind of like you, not super thrilled about the pangolin abuse, maybe, but I'm sure it's very cute in the context of the game. And honestly, like, aside from Sandslash, like, what other pangolin exists in a video game? So any pangolin representation is probably a good thing.
I mean, I stomp on turtles in Mario, and I have a pet turtle. I would never stomp on Kiwi, though, so we're good. Kiwi's up
great
the
stuff.
room going, Yeah, no, this is great. I think it's super cool. I had not heard about this until, I found it through Gaming Mag. So I guess Gaming Mag like updates, like, I feel like once a week sometimes. It's clearly emblematic of the fact that there's very little queer content, and it's even harder to find when there is, because it's not always easy to tell when a developer who works on a game is queer. Like, I wouldn't have known that Star Wars Outlaws had queer developers if I didn't know June and Black, if I didn't work in Toronto and know that there were lots of queer people that made games. But, like, you just don't know. So I guess I recommend people finding websites like Gaming Mag to find these games themselves. Because otherwise it's a crapshoot on social media whether or not this comes across your feed. So.
Yeah.
Let's move on to September, unless anyone has any final thoughts. I feel like I might have just cut someone off, so I don't want to.
No, sorry. I think I was making, like, sounds to be like, oh, one more thing. No, my bad.
No, go for it, please.
There was actually one game that I could probably quickly talk about it because I haven't played it, but I think it's worth mentioning for August because it released then, and there's just been I've come across a lot of news around it. So for August, there was a game that released called Dustborn, as in, like, D-U-S-T, born. And it was made by the devs who have made Dreamfall Chapters and Draugen. I believe they're a Nordic studio. And Dustborn was something that, leading up to the release, I was really excited about, especially because I believe one of the kind of like showrunners or maybe main writers or something, is Ragnar Tornquist, who was the main writer and creator of, like, the point and click adventure games, The Longest Journey and Dreamfall: The Longest Journey, which are, like, the first one is from, like, the 90s, and the second one I think might have been mid 2000s. Both are really, really cool and solid games if you like point and click adventures and you like fantasy and magic and cool stuff. But yeah, this game was coming out and it seemed really, really cool. Like, it was a kind of I'm actually going to pull up the description so I can do it justice. So on Steam, it says Ragtag Crew, check. Musical gear, check. Tour bus and robot driver, check. Stolen package, check. Embark on a perilous road trip across the divided states of America. Use the power of words to shape relationships with your crew. Get out of trouble and reach your final destination. It is a...
Is this a documentary?
No, it's it's kind of like a, hey, follow these group of people who are trying to fight the man and change the world, and, like, that's the vibe that I got from it. But it features an almost, from what I remember from the demo, like, a lot of the cast is POC, which is really cool. And the main character, I believe, has a partner who is non-binary, which is really neat. And when I played the demo, I loved it. I was like, this is awesome. I love the look of this. I like the gameplay. This is going to be a great game. And then when it released, it got such a just an overwhelming, from what I could see, surge of negative reviews. And I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, I mean, I've never seen this studio even get this much press, to be honest. Like, their games aren't like, you know, AAA or way up there or anything. Like, I kind of came across them, but it was an interesting, like, from the reviews that I was seeing, it was a really interesting, like, reasoning as to why they were negative reviews. And so I don't want to put stock entirely into what they're saying because I want to play the game myself and actually experience it. But it seemed to be a mixture of people who don't have, like, you know, who like the reasoning is null and not, like, it shouldn't be held with a grain of salt or anything. Like, it's people who are like, this game is too woke. Like, then I'm like, okay, well, I don't care about your opinion. But there were others who were saying, like, well, this is an interesting one where, like, the game is definitely trying to push these really cool and like progressive ideas forward, but the terminology they use is a little strange and kind of like tone deaf in terms of what they were trying to do. So like, for example, a lot of the characters, they have powers, I think, and their powers are through their words. So they can like, you yell a word and then you can like, something will materialize in front of you or something. And so one of the characters has the ability to like basically persuade others, like talk to someone to get what they want, and they'll be able to like influence them or persuade them. However, the term they use for that, apparently, and this was something I was reading in an article because I didn't play this this part in the demo, but someone was saying this. Apparently, the term they use is gaslighting, and they use it as like a positive because it's like you're playing as this character who wants justice and good, and like, but she used the power gaslight, and then that's great. But like, gaslighting as a term is like obviously very negative and very like, it's not a good thing. That's kind of the general understanding of it. So like, it was just such an interesting bit of news to come about just because I saw like so many negative reviews and I was like, wow, like this is really interesting. And that website that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast episode, Checkpoint Gaming, actually has a really good review from Charlie Kelly about this game, and it's worth reading, and I think it's really good about like acknowledging the game's failings, but also like what it's being really like what it's boldly trying to do and what it succeeds with. I believe there was a pretty big studio that also published it too. But anyway, I just wanted to mention it because I'm really interested in playing it, but it was just such a wild like bit of news when it came out, when it released, that there was just so much negative about it, and I was like, that's crazy. But yeah, I really want to play it.
Sorry, I just
Quantic
wanted to
Dream.
note that.
Yes.
Dream. Well, they have I guess a label called Spotlight by Quantic Dream is what it's called. But
okay.
Yeah, it seems like this checks all the boxes for things that make anti-DEI gamers mad.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, right. Like it was just interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. It has mostly positive reviews now on Steam, and the recent reviews are very positive. So I think people who actually played it and gave it the time of day are reviewing it positively. But it seems really cool. I like the aesthetic.
Oh, it seems
so
like
nice. Something I want to play. So
yeah, I definitely want to get it on. Like, I want to get it on a console so I can enjoy it on like a nice big screen, because the details in the demo were just so gorgeous. So and there's a rhythm game aspect of it too. It was very fun. You get to basically do a little bit of Guitar Hero.
Oh.
Yeah.
Amy Lynn, do you have any thoughts?
Not in particular.
Okay. So September is really short because it's basically just a quick bullet point that Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom came out. And while this game is not queer necessarily, we did talk about the adoption of certain characters from the series as transgender. There's obviously... obviously there's like a female character. Like, the game finally lets you play as Zelda. I have my own thoughts about the gameplay itself. I think it's not as good as other 2D Zelda games, and it breaks my heart because I really wish the game where you finally play as Zelda was a lot better. But granted, I haven't finished. I've only gone through the first 2 dungeons, but the second dungeon was really miserable. I just they don't give you a way to fight that makes any sense. Like, the fighter is a health bar and like on a timer, and when it runs out, you have to use the echoes to fight, and it's exhausting. It's just like, let me shoot a bow and arrow, or like give Zelda different powers, but still let her traverse the world with the echoes. Don't make the echoes for fighting, but make the echoes for traversal, and make the fighting like her. Because like when they made Curse of the Necrodancer, the Zelda version, they gave Zelda her own moveset. She uses magic. She uses the Bow of Light. Like she, actually I don't know if she uses the Bow of Light, but she uses magic for sure. Whereas Link has the sword and the bow and arrow. So like if you don't want to give her Link's powers, which makes some sense, at least give her some way to fight that makes it easy and fun for the players. Like, I'm not asking for an easy game, but like, make it intuitive. I don't want to have to like worry about, like, I don't want to stress about defeating enemies because my little bar is about to run out and then I have to refill it in a different room and then come back and reset the enemies. Like, what kind of, I think it's bullshit. Personally.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I haven't played it, but I mean, I would agree with you in that, like, I mean, there's literally, canonically, the weapons that Zelda would use would be like, arrows of light, or she would just like create a light, like she could like in Ocarina of Time, she holds Ganon at the end of it and is just like, go do the finishing blow, Link. Like she can do magic. Let her do magic.
we have Smash Brothers and the Hyrule Warriors games. If they were wanting to explore the idea of Zelda using magic and other abilities as a protagonist role. I mean, I appreciate the creativity. I think it's cool, but of course, the first time Zelda gets to be playable as a protagonist, as the main character, it's, this weird experimental thing. It's a little unfortunate.
Yeah. But let's move on to October. So in October, we got Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. I have my own thoughts and feelings about remastering a game that is once again already playable and enhanced for PS5. But unlike Last of Us Part 2, which is a game I really enjoy, I did not enjoy Horizon Zero Dawn. I like the story, I like the characters, cannot stand the gameplay at all. The open world is boring as fuck, and I'm gonna admit I found the game difficult and challenging in a way because I didn't understand the gameplay. I never found it intuitive, and maybe this is a skill issue on my part, and I'm fully ready to admit that. But I played on the easiest difficulty, which was story difficulty, and I was still getting nuked by characters that I should have been able to easily defeat. I just couldn't figure it out, and I didn't enjoy it. So I kind of rushed through all the gameplay so I could get to the meat of the story, which I loved. But I didn't even go and play the DLC on it. So
DLC was fun, but that's also just I really enjoyed it in general. So
that's fair. I wanted to play the DLC, but I was so tired of the gameplay that I should have gone and done a watch through, a let's play. But at the time I was thinking, well, I'm gonna get to this eventually. I kept it installed for a good 6 months.
Yeah.
And then as I was adding other games, downloading other games to play and moving on to other things, I eventually just removed it to make space on my PS5.
That's fair.
Then we also got Life is Strange Double Exposure. I'm not going to say much about this. It's a queer game. I've talked about it on this podcast at length. My thoughts on this are very clear. But I do wonder if Ekami or Amylin, you have any thoughts on this game?
I wouldn't say I'd have any immediate thoughts. I want to play all of the Life is Strange games, and I haven't yet, so that's my thoughts.
You haven't even played the first one?
I've played the first 3 chapters, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would say go finish the first one.
Yeah.
I think they're all worth playing. I haven't played the second game because it's not a sapphic game, which is what I like about these games.
True.
But I do think they're all good except for this one.
Yeah.
So
and I mean, thinking back to I do remember the reason why I never finished the first one. It's because I had it on PC and I was working off of a laptop that at the slightest touch of a button, I feared it would explode in front of me. So running that game was just a nightmare. So I think that's why I just never finished it.
I have a lot of nostalgia for watching the playthrough of it. I think My Video Game's Awesome, which I think was a Canadian Let's Play sort of show. And I really enjoyed it vicariously through them, but I haven't played them myself.
I mean, you play mainly on Nintendo, and it wasn't until very recently that I finally got all the games running on Nintendo, and I still don't think they run that well, despite these games being a decade old. So it's understandable. I think it's one of those things that when they finally came to Switch, it made a lot of sense. But before then, I was why aren't they on there? Especially knowing that half of Nintendo's community is or I don't know what the actual stat was we read earlier. I literally went in one ear out the other apparently, but that Nintendo has a huge queer player base, and that Square Enix just said well, we don't really like Nintendo, so we're not going to put our games over there. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy VII is also still on Nintendo now for the first time ever, but they wouldn't put Life is Strange, which actually makes a bit more sense than Final Fantasy, in my opinion. I'm sure many would disagree. But the other game we got this month in October was Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Another queer game, and I've talked about it at length on this podcast. I still have not played it. It might be a winter break game. It might not. It depends if it goes on sale, because I have so much to play over the break, and now some new games that have been added to my wish list. So thanks, guys. Great.
You're welcome.
But it does let you make a trans character. It does let you, if you're trans masculine, you can add top surgery scars. I feel there's probably no option for bottom surgery scars for trans women, which would be cool. But if they're not showing genitals, then we're gonna have to wait for whatever cyberpunk sequel they're making to get that. But if in one of the dialogue options, which is slightly hidden, but if you do find it, it's like super obvious once you find it. You can actually make it so your character is trans, and characters will respond to you and talk to you as if they know you're transgender, which is, one way to play for sure. I feel like a lot of trans people might want to bury themselves in the story and forget that side of themselves while just playing out their gender, but it's cool that it's in there because very few games ever give you that much malleability of your character to just like say, hey, I'm also transgender, and to have everyone in the world know that. So, any thoughts?
Just what you last said, I think that's really like cool to give that option. And the fact that it sounds like it is, an option, which I think is great. Like, as much as I'm sure a lot of people would love to use it as like an escape and, something like this being, going to a world where, your gender identity or gender status doesn't really matter. Like, I think it could be really affirming for some people to have NPCs, comment as if they know maybe the challenges that your character has gone through, over the course of their life or things like that. So I don't know exactly what the dialogue options are, but I think it's a great step.
I do wonder if there's like at least one character that's dead naming you and misgendering you for the real full genuine experience. So one last thing for October, I realize we're already almost 90 minutes into the podcast and I would like to start closing it up, but the last thing for October, and I mentioned this earlier slightly, but Super Mario Party Jamboree came out, and Birdo, or Birdetta as she should be called, is Mario's first trans feminine character, at least in the West, is a playable character. It sucks that they still use her dead name in all the appearances, but at least she's playable. So I'm sure we could talk about Mario Party at length, given who I'm speaking with right now. But we're going to move on to November, and we're going to pick up where we left off on Stardew Valley 1.6, because the update did finally come out in November. It came to consoles, and it did launch initially with a couple bugs that they then quickly fixed. Thankfully, the fix did not take as long as the actual update itself. Then they, in November, we also got a game called, Potionomics was already out. I think it's been out for a couple of years, but we've talked about it on the podcast before. But they added poly dating options to this game, so you can play as a woman. You do play as a woman, but you were given the option of quote unquote one love or quote unquote free love. So obviously one love is monogamy and the other one is polyamory.
Cool.
The summary of the game is you've inherited your uncle's potion shop and a huge debt. Better get brewing. Customize your store, hire heroes to gather ingredients, befriend or romance fellow vendors to learn new haggling strategies, and go head-to-head with competitors in this narrative-driven deck-building shop simulator. I don't remember if either of you were on the podcast where we talked about Potionomics.
I think I remember talking about it.
Okay, so then you were on the show. I don't remember, Amy Lynn, if you were.
Yeah, that doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, well, it seems pretty cool if you're into like witchy stuff or if you're into deck builders. It also seems a bit visual novel-y. So it's got a little bit of a bunch of different genres in there, but it seems really cool, and it's really cool too that 2 years later they're still updating the game, and not just updating the game with like bug fixes or small features, but like a pretty big feature of polyamory. So I gotta give credit where credit is due.
Agreed.
And now maybe Amy Lynn will actually have a chance to play Lego on Switch, or not Lego. Oh my god, I just the whole thing. Okay, Horizon came out on Switch, weirdly enough. It's a PlayStation console exclusive, but they made a Lego version. And I guess Sony, knowing that Lego games sell incredibly well on the Switch, they added Lego Horizon to the Switch. So maybe Amy Lynn can finally experience Horizon. And
I feel like Aloy in a banana suit isn't going to give me the full experience of the series.
Well, it covers the story of the first game, so if you just want the story like I do, maybe I might just wait for her Lego Horizon Adventures 2 to find out what happens in the sequel game. So
I'm so excited for Lego Horizon as well. So my partner's been playing or recently played the Lego Star Wars games, because I think they came to PS Plus, and I remember watching bits and pieces and I was like, I forgot how funny these Lego games are. Like, they're so fun. So I'm gonna have a great time with Lego Horizon Adventures when I eventually get it.
I also I've met someone who worked on some Lego games. And I'm hoping to get this person on as a guest, maybe, if I'm very, very fortunate. I don't think they currently work on the Lego games anymore, especially since I think most of the Lego games are not made by the original developer, Traveler's Tales. But anyway, yeah, I would like to get this person on the podcast. They're very cool. The fact that they've worked on Lego games means they probably have a wild sense of humor. Maybe. I don't know. It depends what part of the game they worked on, obviously. But this person I met a very long time ago, so I'm looking to someone else I know to probably put me back in touch with this person. But anyway, look forward to that hopefully next year as I try to hype up this show and get more listeners if you're listening to this. And then the last thing for November, and I want to get to this too because Amy Lynn, I feel like, hasn't spoken as much. And she had thoughts about this. So they announced a sequel to Hogwarts Legacy, and it sounded like it was being fast-tracked, honestly. But I do try to keep this podcast... I'm just going to note, though, that I do try to keep this podcast wholesome. At one point, I did have an entire side rant, like a tangent about this game, Hogwarts Legacy, because I have thoughts too. I mean, ask any trans person, and they're gonna have thoughts, or they're either gonna have all the thoughts, or I shut this out and have none of the thoughts. But despite the wholesome nature of the podcast, I feel like we should discuss this a little bit because it's been such a big part of the gaming community lately. The game does feature a trans character, and depending on who you ask, it's either very inclusive or completely shit. But this game was also a huge source of debate between the trans community and the general gaming community. But anyway, Amy Lynn, you have thoughts, and I would like to hear them before I start ranting.
Well, I think my main thoughts here is that, I think there's such... I mean, I don't think it'll happen, but I think that there's a great opportunity for the writers and developers to make one of the primary protagonists... or the primary characters, a young trans character, and to really, make that as essentially a point of inclusivity, saying that yes, some money will go to she who must not be named, but there will, we still care about inclusivity and maybe even care about the queer fans who feel excluded and still want to explore the world of the series. I don't think that they'll have the confidence or the backing to do something like that. But I think it would be such a powerful statement if they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think the character is likely to be trans masc more than they are likely to be trans femme. I know that the character is in the previous game was trans feminine, but I know that Harry Potter himself I've seen people adopt him as a trans masculine character, or at least as a closeted gay man. So, I mean, there's so much queerness in the narrative of Harry Potter that I would be shocked if J.K. Rowling herself wasn't queer in some way, and that this tirade against the community, especially trans people, is not some kind of projection. And I know a lot of people disagree with saying that someone is queer because they are so hateful, but it's also a very, it's a trend as old as time that all these things are projection. So, I mean, I could go on about this for a long time. Ekami, do you have any thoughts?
I don't really like when the game got announced, I mean, first of all, I didn't know there was a sequel, so I guess that's interesting. But when the first game got announced, I was just I don't know, everything that I'd read about J.K. Rowling, and all the stuff that was coming up about, hey, there's a trans playable character or trans character. Maybe they're not playable, but
they're not playable.
They're not okay. So, but their name is it wasn't. It almost seemed kind of punny in a bad way, and I was like, oh, all right, well, that's kind of insensitive. And then just J.K. Rowling in general, I was just I don't know, I don't follow her, I don't really like her. I read Harry Potter as a kid, and now I've basically sworn off it just because I just don't want to support her. But I can understand and respect, obviously there are people who still really, really enjoy the story and connect with the story, when they were growing up or when they just read it at any point in their life. So I can respect and obviously agree with more representation is better than none. I just wish that it wouldn't be meaning that J.K. Rowling gets money. that's what it comes down to for me. Yeah.
I also want to note, going back, we use they them pronouns for the trans character, who I think actually has confirmed she her pronouns.
Okay.
And this is something that a lot of people do, and I don't want to be one of these people who does it. But defaulting to they them pronouns for trans women is also a form of transphobia. And I'm not trying to call anyone out on the podcast. I'm just trying to do better myself. And I didn't mean to use they them pronouns to describe the character, who's actually called Serona Ryan. A big sir in her name there.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean that does fit. That does fit, nicely with what is it, Rusty Shacklebolts and
Kingsley Shacklebolt.
Cho Chang.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the Indian characters, of course, being Patels. It is a common name, so it's not the worst. But it's kind of fitting in a horribly offensive way. If there was going to be a trans character in a J.K. Rowling universe, that's what she would be named.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's pretty freaking accurate. So, but we should move on, because we can make this is not going to get any lighter. The episode is ending on a dark note because there's actually a couple more things. I was going to talk about the Game Awards, but we're going over time now. You can also listen to the podcast I recorded yesterday and released. It released on December 16th, so go find that episode. It's called The Game Awards, with a cheeky little Y in there for gay. I do cover most of the queer stuff in there. And especially with the added context of this episode, you'll understand why maybe I included certain games as queer. But for some general 2024 stuff, I wrote here in the notes, layoffs all fucking year. And according to Wikipedia, I did mention a number. In the Game Awards, they said there were 34,000 layoffs. According to Wikipedia, when I was looking up the numbers, and I know Wikipedia is not a source, but Wikipedia had other sources, so I was just trying to get an aggregate here. A general ballpark number is that at the time of recording, there's been about 14,000 this year compared to 10,000 last year. I think 34,000 was for the last 2 or 3 years since the pandemic. But a lot of fucking layoffs. So the game industry, especially indie developers, support them. I'm not saying go out and spend $90 on Ubisoft games. I'm not saying that the EAs and the Activisions and the Blizzards and the Tencents of the world need to be supported. I think these companies are going to lay people off anyway, because the CEOs, in the same breath as laying people off, they also say, hey, we made record profits this year. And they're, I fucking hate it. And I don't want to end the podcast on such a sour note, but I do think this needs to be discussed, because I'm certain that some of these people that got laid off were also queer. And generally speaking, sometimes the first people to get laid off are the queer people, because we're so easy to just kick out the fucking door. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a real shame, honestly. Like from what the numbers that or the stats that you were giving, like having an additional 4,000 more, like compared to last year, that's pretty staggering, considering. And I know that it's difficult enough to be, a very small team or even a one-person team for an indie game making your own game, but to really get into the industry and get into the industry, and then the industry says, hey, we don't actually need this thing. We can just we can just do this for cheaper. So you're being let go, is really hard and disheartening. And I don't have necessarily friends in game development, at least directly. Well, I do know a few people, I should say. There are a few people that I have who are friends who are in game development, but it's disheartening to hear. It's a real shame. I really wish that I think the Game Awards had something about was it someone who won an award that was based on his support, and it was around layoffs. He said they mentioned the number of layoffs, but I don't know.
It also turns out he might work for Tencent. Again, I still haven't verified this. It's been 24 hours since I recorded the last episode, so I haven't had a chance to sit down and verify whether this person actually works for one of the companies responsible for these layoffs. But apparently this guy is a Tencent employee. So even though this is not a Tencent operation,
right?
People are saying that he might be part of the problem too. Granted, I think if he is trying to get people jobs, he's not as bad as everyone says, but maybe if he's getting people jobs that aren't necessarily stable with Tencent. Again, I don't have the full information. I only know what I briefly read on Twitter, and I know what was in the Game Awards. So
yeah. Yeah, I can only hope that like it'll like the number will decrease over time. Maybe like even just having this like mention at the Game Awards, I think that was pretty big. Like just to at least bring it into the fold so that people are more aware of it. So I think that is a like, even though potentially, you know, he might be possibly problematic, I think it's a good thing and a positive thing that at least it was brought to light. And I hope that it creates a more positive outcome for the next year.
I definitely agree that I hope that things improve in the coming year and years. I'm not super optimistic, especially when it comes to sort of the AAA or AA. I'm not sure what companies count as AA, sort of studios, but you know, I do have continued hopes that the smaller studios, I'm thinking about like the larger indie ones, or the independent teams continue to thrive and impress. Like, I'm thinking about like, those medium small success stories like Balatro, like Undertale, like even Hades, which is like the biggest indie game probably. Like, I think that as long as these companies can set a positive example and, companies like Nintendo, who isn't that bad as far as a Japanese company goes, Sega, like, there are good examples out there. And I think that celebrating and praising, these companies and these games and these studios and these people is sort of a good tack to take here. We shouldn't stop shaming the horrible practices, all the layoffs, all the crunch, the mental health issues. But I'm hopeful that, by highlighting some of the positives, we can start trends and have more people talk about, the Hades of the world, and the smaller studios that still create amazing experiences, and find the larger studios that do have really high quality work environments, and talk about that during all the development interviews, like during the Summer Game Fest, during the whatever replaces E3, which might be the Game Awards. Like in all of these things, like say like, hey, I'd like to thank my team. They're really great with mental health support. We go out and play baseball every month. Like that would be so heartwarming to hear. Even just like, hey, I love going out for lunch with these people. Like, we need more of that.
Yeah, just to kind of segue back in, because I think we're going to wrap up the show, but I think, first off, thank you, Amy Lynn, for bringing it back to a more positive note and a more hopeful note, at least. I do hope that the coming year and years are better. You did say you weren't optimistic. I'm not either, but I feel like I have to be. I want to be optimistic. I do think too, with all this, like you said, supporting queer developers, queer development, studios that are inclusive and studios that are forward thinking and progressive. I hope to highlight more of those in the coming year. And I do think this podcast only started a couple months ago, but like going through the year that we just did, even though we probably didn't cover even a fraction of the queer indie games that released, and maybe even maybe there were AAA games we missed on this list and we just didn't know. But I do think it was a strong year. I do think it could have been stronger, and maybe again we missed things, but I think we had a lot to talk about in this podcast. We went a lot longer than I thought, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh yeah.
But in the interest, since we all have to record one more episode, which will be coming out the following week, where we actually do talk about 2025 and how hopeful we are, I am going to wrap up the show. So thanks for joining us for another episode of True Avatars, a queer video game podcast. If you've made it this far into the episode, I really appreciate you taking the time to support queer-made content, because it's a big deal. It's been really fun working to bring this podcast to you. I always do my best to bring queer voices on every week to discuss what's relevant in video games. As of this week, the podcast now has a bunch of social media pages. You can find the show on Instagram under True Avatars, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube you can find under the handle @TrueAvatars, all one word. That's Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube @TrueAvatars. We also have a Facebook page, which can be found by searching True Avatars, a queer video game podcast. Please ignore the fact that I've barely posted anything yet. In fact, I haven't even shared the Game Awards episode on any social media handles because I was so busy today. This show is, and I love doing this, by the way. I love doing all those show notes. I love recording. I love editing. I love finding guests. I love interacting with people. I love doing the pre-interviews that I've been doing the last few weeks. I love finding new queer games. I love everything about this, and I would love to do more promotion on social media. I would love to get the website up and running. I would love to, if the show gets big enough, run a Patreon page maybe. And again, I'm not really interested in making money off this show. I just want to find ways to engage with the community. But the more I do, the more I realize this podcast is a full-time job. Like, I don't know how anyone's doing this and also like doing a full-time job. And I say that and I'm literally doing it, but I don't know how. Some days I'm like amazed with myself that this is all a thing. But anyway, that's why there are certain things that I've been like, I recently switched from Spotify for podcasters to Podbean, and it started censoring the show titles. And even though it's better for sharing the podcast to more platforms, it's also censoring things, and I don't like that. And it's also making me mark the podcast as explicit. I don't think swearing, I don't think queerness, I don't think sex should all be explicit. I think as a society, we need to move away from that and maybe make violence more explicit than we already have and make sex less explicit. And I think queerness in general is not explicit. Yeah, maybe there's some elements of sex that comes with queerness that maybe should be labeled explicit, but only insofar as like straight sex should be labeled explicit, which I also, to be honest, fundamentally disagree with, but that's a whole other topic. I'm trying to wrap up the show here. I'm getting back on my fucking soapbox. But anyway, that's why there hasn't been a lot of posting and a lot of interaction. So if you are listening to the show, just, send me a DM on Twitter or somewhere. I refuse to call it X. Fuck that.
Yep.
Importantly, though, if you or anyone you know is queer and involved with video games in some way, and I said this earlier in the show, please reach out. Okay, do not hesitate. I would love to hear from more queer voices. I would love to hear from you, especially if you work in video games or video game adjacent even. Your voice is unique and valid and worth sharing with the world. And I know I say that and it sounds like some buzzwords in there, but I actually do believe that. Okay, I want to hear from you. No voice is too small. No job is too weird or different or small. You're a queer person and you're involved with video games. You're doing it. Like you are doing it. You are, even if you're just a queer person listening to this and you're not involved with video games, like you're doing it, like good for you. And if you don't want to be on the show or you don't know anyone who's interested, but maybe you know about a cool queer video game or a games industry story that's queer related, please let me know. Again, I try to find these things, but I don't always have the time. And sometimes it's just hard to find things. So, nothing is too small or too irrelevant to possibly include on an episode. The show's email, and I'm going to give this out every week, is trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. That's trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. You can reach me there. You can also feel free to reach out through any of the DM features on the social media platforms I mentioned. Things are tough out there, and queer people need to stick together when we can. So bye, True Avatars. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again next week. Take care and stay safe.